Josh Hammer, senior editor-at-large at Newsweek, host of the Josh Hammer Show and the new America on Trial. There it is. Nice logo. America on Trial right here at the first. Josh, how are we doing, sir?
Mike, I'm doing great. Always a pleasure to join you, my friend.
Do you remember that meter thing, the New York Times? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I remember when it was at literally 99%. I mean, it was not 97 or 98%, Mike, if I recall. It actually hit 99%. I remember that night like it was yesterday. Crazy.
And we're going to live it again. What a great joy. Like if it happened the first time, if God came down and said, enjoy tonight, but it will happen again in 8 more years, I'd be like, no, it can't be possible. But it looks like it very well could be tonight. What do you make of the potential clean sweep here first?
Look, what is there to say? I mean, I think many of us expected Donald Trump to run the table tonight. We'll see what the result is in Vermont. He's probably going to squeak it out there over Nikki Haley. Vermont is obviously one of the bluest states in the entire country. I mean, that's where you have no less of a communist loonbag than Bernie Sanders as the U.S. senator. By the way, Mike, it's always been kind of funny to me how Vermont and New Hampshire are very different states politically, yes, but they're very similar in virtually every other way. They share that border there. New Hampshire has that libertarian, live free or die mentality. They occasionally vote for Republicans statewide. And then Vermont is just like the crazy, like hippy dippy out. It's funny to me how that worked culturally. I'm not really sure exactly what the history is there. But anyway, look, obviously very impressive for Donald Trump. He's running the table there. He's dominating. He is utterly dominating in many of these states. If you look at the crosstabs in a state like North Carolina, he's totally crushing Haley at the top level, but he's actually even beating her among non-college graduates. Or excuse me, he's beating her among college graduates. And that's a very, very big deal. Nikki Haley's only chance to pull an upset here or there, Washington, D.C. happened this weekend, blip on the radar. But her only chance is to just totally dominate with college graduates and, PhDs and MDs and people with fancy degrees. But in a lot of these states, Trump is actually pulling by with even those voters. So he's getting very, very close, I think, to coalescing the party at this point. We'll see whether Nikki finally drops out after tonight's shellacking. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, that's a big point, because that is the big question, is how do you, but I guess this is the question in every primary, right, is how do you bring everyone together? How does everyone come home under one umbrella? How do you get the Nikki Haley supporters? But it sounds like you're saying those even would-be Nikki Haley supporters are already being like, I guess we'll just go with that guy.
For the most part, right? I mean, look, she's still putting up 30-ish, 35% in some of these states. The redder the state, the lower her number is. So you look at states like Tennessee, Oklahoma, Texas. She's running very poorly. I mean, her numbers there are often tonight, based on what we've seen so far, her numbers there are in the 20s. She gets higher the bluer the state is, which makes sense. That's kind of who she's trying to appeal to. So the $1 million question for the coalescing of the Republican Party stuff, which is very important. Every political party has to coalesce more or less here. The biggest question is, do Republicans who are skeptical of Trump, can they get over him being convicted if he's actually convicted? That is the $1 million question, because we've seen a lot of polling that indicates that even self-described Republicans, other than those who are self-described MAGA, like Trump's base of his base, kind of Republican moderates, Republican independents, squishy Republicans, they are less eager to come home, so to speak, if a court actually convicts him and finds that he is guilty in one of these 4 criminal cases. But, thankfully, Mike, you mentioned America on Trial, which is my new show here with the first, and we cover this stuff day in and day out. I can say, based on my reading of all these cases, that I think the only criminal case that is likely to result in a verdict before November is the Alvin Bragg case in New York City. That's the one with Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen and the hush money payments, and it's still not entirely clear what exactly Alvin Bragg is prosecuting for. It's totally frivolous. It's a total joke. It's absolutely farcical. So if that actually is the only conviction that they can land before November, honestly, at that point, I kind of do like Trump's odds of being able to coalesce this party at a equal or potentially even greater chance than he did back in 2020. Part of that, of course, has to do with the fact that his opponent, Joe Biden, is just so catastrophically unpopular and so utterly terrible in everything that he does.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a plus for Trump. I'm really glad you mentioned this and put it that way, about how. Let me ask you this. So we were talking the other day on the radio about January 6th. And no, let me word it like this. Sorry, let me back it up. I saw a poll just this morning and it was even among Republicans that if, as you said, if he's convicted, then it totally switches. Like it's like 48 Biden, 43 Trump, and I'm like, what? Like, why would that make a difference? I don't. So can you give us some insight into the like maybe the mind of that person? Where I mean, we're all looking at the evidence as we see it publicly, and coming to our own conclusions. But somehow, once the verdict comes down in New York City, that would really change people's votes.
So my best guess, and you're totally right, it does flip a lot. And to be clear, just backing up for a second here, that is why the Biden regime, the Biden, Merrick Garland, Jack Smith apparatus, what the late, great Andrew Breitbart famously referred to as the Democrat media complex, that is why the Democrat media complex is currently putting all of its eggs into the lawfare basket. And, the Supreme Court on Monday, just yesterday in the Trump versus Anderson case, they swatted down one of their many tactics unanimously 9-0, but they have a lot more tricks up their sleeve. And I think that Jack Smith's case in Washington, D.C., pertaining to the 2020 election and January 6, 2021, that is the crown jewel of the Democrat media complex. Because Joe Biden is so bad, because he is so unpopular, he is below Trump by 21 points when it comes to handling of the economy, by 25 points when it comes to immigration. He is more unpopular than Trump, and Trump's popularity nationwide was never super high to begin with, to be very candid with you. So he's just in very bad shape, both physically and politically and mentally, frankly, all of the above, as the case may be. So they're really putting all of their eggs into the lawfare basket, and it's that Washington, D.C. crown jewel case. But to your point, Mike, I think that the numbers switch a little bit when it comes to would you vote for him if he's literally convicted in a court of law, in a criminal prosecution. And I think the reason for that is because you have a lot of low information voters and a lot of medium information voters, folks who are not like me and you, who are not living this, breathing this day in and day out, folks who are not necessarily listening to Mike Slater on the radio or listening to America on Trial day in and day out here. And maybe some of them don't actually realize, frankly, that he's actually being criminally prosecuted, that this is real potato stuff here. We're talking about fines, damages, jail times. So there's one thing to kind of hear your neighbor or your fellow parishioner in your church on Sunday talk about, oh, did you hear this happen to Trump? It's a whole nother thing to then have someone tell you he's guilty. Now, do I think it should make a difference? No, because I think all these cases are flawed for one reason or another. But I think we're talking here mostly about low information or medium information voters, probably.
Yeah, that's right. That's really interesting. We got to talk more about that. That's a really fascinating thing. Okay, this crown jewel case. The one before we get to that, it's the next issue in front of the Supreme Court. And I'd love to talk to you about the issue that just was, but we've only got a few minutes, and that's in the past now. That 9-0 just is hilarious. Like the whole thing is hilarious. How the experts and elite and scholars got so just like hilarious. So, but this new one, what's the word I'm looking for that's escaping me tonight? That Trump thinks he has. What's the word? Not anonymity. Immunity. There you go, immunity. So what is your take on presidential immunity while in office, but then after you leave office, do you still have immunity for the things you did? What does Josh Hammer think?
So it's longstanding Department of Justice policy and fairly uncontroversial at that a sitting president has full immunity. This goes back to a Richard Nixon era conclusion back from 1973 when his Office of Legal Counsel inside his own DOJ concluded that a sitting president has full sweeping immunity. That to me clearly has to be right for basic structural constitutional reasons. He has the executive power. He's the commander in chief. That's really not particularly controversial. It was reiterated in a 2000 memo from the Bill Clinton DOJ. It's bipartisan policy. Robert Hur also cited it in his own special counsel report just last month as one reason why he was not prosecuting Biden, in addition to the fact that Joe Biden, obviously, as we all heard it, is senile and mentally incompetent to stand trial. It's a really interesting question, Mike, as to whether a former president is immune after he leaves the presidency. I tend to be fairly pro-Article 2, pro-presidential powers in general when it comes to constitutional structure. So I am in probably a rarer sliver of the legal commentariat, so to speak, that actually is probably the most sympathetic to the claims that Trump's lawyers are making. I actually think it really is not crazy to have full absolute immunity after you leave office for things that you did while in office. To give an example here, do Democrats really want to open up Pandora's box for prosecuting Barack Obama for death of a U.S. citizen in the drone strike of Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen back in 2011 after Obama leaves power? Do you want to open the floodgates of Republican lawyers prosecuting Obama? So it's a very dangerous road to go down. As far as a prediction, though, I think that they're going to issue kind of a mixed opinion. They'll say that some acts have immunity if they're core presidential duties, and then they'll say that some acts, if you hire an assassin to kill your mistress before your wife finds out, that's probably outside the scope of Article 2 presidential duties. So I think they'll issue a mixed opinion, then they'll remand it to a lower court for fact-finding as to whether Jack Smith's alleged conduct of Trump falls into those core duties or not. That's all going to have the effect, Mike, of further dilatory tactics to delay this thing and only help Trump with his effort to play stall ball and slow down the clock more.
All right. Beautiful analysis. That's what you get with America on Trial with Josh Hammer, available right here on the First TV. Just Google Josh Hammer, America on Trial. Josh, great to talk to you as always, brother. Thank you very much.